My name is Justin Dujardin. I'm one of the account executives here at Revelwood, and I'm joined by my colleague Haley Elliott, who will be showing you the overview demo of adaptive planning here in just a few minutes. I just want to take a few minutes to give you an idea of what to expect. Firstly, some background on Revelwood. We are a platinum business partner of Workday. And what that means is that we're part of an extremely select group of partners that help you evaluate and implement adaptive planning. A couple of quick notes. We should be finished in about 45 minutes. During that time frame, everybody is on mute. But if you have a question, there is a Q&A button down at the bottom in the center. Please enter any questions that you have there, and we will try to get to it if we can. If not, we will make sure to get back to you via email. I'm aware that some of you may be here because you have an active initiative to get into a cloud FP&A solution, or you may just be here to learn or you're curious. Either way, we greatly appreciate you taking 15 minutes with us in the next few days just to have a quick chat and see what your current challenges are, if you have any feedback for us, and whether there are resources that we can follow up with. I only have a few slides before I pass it to Haley, but adaptive planning is a place where you can do your modeling, reporting, and analytics all in one place. So everything that you need is in one solution, and it will act as your central source of truth, if you will. And typically, we're talking with finance teams, and of course, we're pulling in the general ledger data. But adaptive can connect to really any data source that you need it to, because at the end of the day, data is data, and you'll be able to bring all of that data together into one place to model and report with confidence. So we see finance as being the center orchestrator of the process. But with Workday Adaptive Planning, you get a planning platform that supports your entire company. It enables not just power users or analysts, but everybody throughout the organization to participate. It's not limited to a single department or organization, but every function at every level to plan to the details of their needs. And then you can seamlessly bring it together into a holistic company-wide business plan. And so financial services organizations that rely on static, spreadsheet-driven planning and forecasting certainly risk falling behind in today's increasingly competitive and global market. So with that said, there's no limits to the operational areas of the business you can plan and model within Adaptive. On our short overview demo today, we do hope to show you how flexible the solution is. So we will look at things like revenue modeling for complex assets under management, product and service offerings, scenarios on interest rates, workforce planning, or planning for acquisitions and asset divestments. But keep an open mind, every department, such as sales, marketing, can use adaptive planning. Now, adaptive runs on Elastic Hypercube technology. It's just a fancy name. It's a patented Workday technology, and it is a key competitive differentiator. I'm not going to talk about the technical specifics because it isn't important, but the reason it is key is because it makes the solution scalable and able to have an unlimited number of dimensions, an unlimited number of versions, scenarios, while still being easy to use and maintain with no coding or assistance from IT needed. And this is because all the data is in a single database, as opposed to legacy OLAP technology that most competitors use, where data lies in multiple databases. So the single database also means that all of your data is always in real time, which is key for confidence and accuracy in your reports. This slide shows you some probably familiar financial services logos. It's certainly no stranger to Workday Adaptive Planning. It's a big industry for adaptive planning. And don't be intimidated by these logos, because the reason why adaptive planning has by far the most customers globally of any planning solution, with over 6,500 customers, over 50% of those customers are small business organizations. And it's the unique technology that allows it to span from small business all the way to large enterprise, because it's both scalable and easy to use and maintain, which is really unique. And actually, so that's it. So at this point, I will pass it to Haley. I did just want to highlight once again that Workday Adaptive has over 6,500 customers globally. And the way they got to that number is with a 97% plus customer retention rate. And Workday itself has been ranked #1 on Fortune's Future 50 list, which ranks companies for most prospects for long-term growth. And that's because they reinvest 35% of revenue back into the product every year. So the product will certainly continue to improve and be able to scale with your organization. With that, I'll pass it to Haley.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Justin. My name is Haley Elliott, and I'm a senior pre-sale solutions consultant here at Revelwood. A little bit about my background. I've been working with Adaptive for about 3 years now, and actually spent the first half or so of that implementing financial planning, workforce planning, and operational planning use cases. That really just means if you have any more technical questions or want to dive a little bit deeper into anything I'm showing today, please feel free to pop those questions into the chat, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. But with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the demo. So y'all should be able to see my game plan for today. Over here on this side of the screen, you are going to just see a couple of different use cases just to keep in the back of your mind as we're moving through the demonstration for the financial services industry specifically. So thinking about forecasting out assets under management and any complex services you might offer, everything from talent management, looking at scenarios around interest rate fluctuations, which we all know is super fun right now. So just keep in mind the diversity of use cases that you can start to apply some of the things I'm going to show today. On this side is our guide for today's demo. So we are going to start with adaptive fundamentals, just getting you oriented in the system. And then we'll move into active dashboards and how we use those as a part of our budgeting process instead of just kind of on the analysis perspective. We'll move into our financial statements with a focus on the P&L, although do know that we do build full three financial statement models in Adaptive. So happy to pop into a balance sheet and cash flow as well. And then we'll dive into some of the models that actually build up those financial statements and conclude on 2 different types of reporting that are also available in Adaptive. So that's our game plan. Again, though, feel free to pop in any other questions in the chat. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and take us into Adaptive. So one thing to note before I do jump into this is that I'm going to be in an admin view for today's demonstration. That just means I'm going to be able to see literally every data point, every sheet, every dashboard, and every possible navigational option in Adaptive. Every user can have their own view. So you have a lot of flexibility with permissions and can heavily restrict the view that I'll be moving through today based on kind of who's going to be signing in. So just keep that in mind. And then you also have the flexibility to change what people see when they first sign in. So while I am a very visual person, I like to see kind of a snapshot of our company summary when I sign in. Someone else might want to come in and just see a report, company announcements, or a budgeting template that they frequently work with. So the fundamentals, though, you're going to see 2 different elements on almost every screen of Adaptive. So you're going to see your level structure and versions. So levels are typically your organizational structure. So think your different branches, regions, departments, anything along those lines. And what's cool about this is it's going to be your first line of security in Adaptive. So typically what you'll do is assign an end user to a level or a group of levels that they're responsible for. And then every single dashboard, report, and sheet or working template is going to be automatically filtered to their level of access. So that's going to be important for 2 reasons. The first is just data aggregation. So a lot of you are probably in Excel with 20 versions of the exact same template for all different departments. In Adaptive, you create the template once. It's filtered through the level structure, and as I make changes for my community banking branches and save them, that's going to roll up to the total organization. So it will automate that data consolidation process for you. The other piece here is, of course, data security. When we're working with things like assets or personnel data, we want people to only be seeing what's relevant to their individual department or branch. So that's the level also super flexible. I had a client go public during implementation and completely reorg. And they were able to completely change their level structure to match. So think flexibility as we move through the platform as well. The other item I mentioned was versions. So you do get an unlimited number of versions in Adaptive for things like different budget iterations. If you do any sort of rolling forecast, your 3+9s, that kind of thing. Or if you just want a bunch of what if versions to play around in. So you can load in as much data as you'd like as well. I have another client who has 11 terabytes of data, just to give you an idea of scale, and that doesn't impact your subscription price at all. You'll notice on this bottom version here is that it's locked. That just means for anything that's board approved or that you don't want changed, there's a little checkbox that you can check to lock that version down so that users can't come in and make changes to the data in that version, but they can come in and copy it over into a new reforecast, pull it into reports, or just go into a sheet and look at the data. So it helps preserve that kind of initial reference point for you to come back to in the future. So that's kind of the fundamentals here. I do want to get a little bit into data integration. So we have quite a few different ways to get data into the system. This is our navigation menu. Your entire planning, reporting, and analytics process is available right here, including that data integration. So we'll talk through a couple of different ways to get the base data into the system that we'll then go ahead and start building our budget off of. So we'll start with automated integration. Adaptive does have a native integration platform. We do not use any sort of third-party tools or anything like that. So it's one place to manage all of your data. We are data agnostic, which in less fancy terms just means we can connect to literally any source system, your ERP, your CRM, your HRIS system, really any system you have, whether it's cloud-based or on-prem, we are able to do a direct connection to bring that data into Adaptive on an automated cadence. So how that works is we'll actually connect directly to the source system and then set up something called a task. That task will automatically load your data, whether it's GL balances and transactions, or any other type of data really on an automated schedule. So you probably won't have this many tasks. This is just an example of me having about 15 different integrations. But what's cool here is you can schedule a time for these integrations to run. So if you want your GL balances and transactions updated nightly, every hour, every 15 minutes, you have full control over that. But if you know you're at month end and a big transaction just posted, you can always come into one of these tasks as a finance user, not IT. You can come in here, select what date you're trying to load. So the month, the year, the period range, everything else is default. So all you need to do is click run. So it's going to be more of the ad hoc option for loading data, but your default will be that automated connection. The other option for loading data outside of automation, so let's say you only need to update your personnel roster once a month, which is a really common case for most of our clients. You might choose to come down here into the manual import area and just upload a CSV template. So Adaptive, you just tell it what type of data you're trying to load, and it'll actually create that upload template for you. It takes maybe a minute or two to run. And then all of your data is available for your budgeting process. So those are the two main options for integration. Happy to get into any more specific discussions about specific systems you all might have. The last thing I wanted to call out before we dive into some of these pretty dashboards we're seeing is just the amount of support you have available in Adaptive. So Adaptive is meant to be fully owned by finance. So you do get 24/7, 365 support from Workday available directly in the platform. So you always have an actual person to talk to. But if you're very self-service, just want to figure out the answer yourself, you also have a context-dependent knowledge base available. It's that little question mark up top that's going to say, hey, you're on a dashboard. Are you trying to build a dashboard? Here's how you do that. So kind of a nice back pocket IT person there. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and finish up our basics and move into dashboarding. So dashboards in Adaptive were called active dashboards for a couple of reasons. The first is that you can click on any dial you see. So we'll take our ending balance, and you'll have two different options for drilling down. The first is exploring data, and that's going to open up a cell explorer here that tells me things like what branches are generating this number, if there are any dimensions associated with it. But most importantly, this is going to provide me an audit trail. So every single piece of data in Adaptive, you can pull an audit trail and see who's been making changes, when they made those changes, and what those changes were. So lots of detail around data monitoring. And then you can also drill back into the budgeting template that you're using to create this number. So your visuals and your models are on the exact same platform. The other option here was to drill down by dimension. And so if I wanted to look at ending balance by loans or branches or something like that, I can just continue drilling down and see the split between our community and commercial banks. So pretty straightforward. You do get an unlimited number of dimensions in Adaptive. So if you want to go crazy and have 200 different ways to split this, we do have some clients with that many dimensions. So full flexibility for however you like to report. The last reason these are called active dashboards is, as you can see here, you can actually bring your models directly onto the dashboards as either part of your budgeting process for people who like to have some charts to go along with their budget, or just for scenario analysis. So what I have on the screen is an example of a capital budget. So if I, as a manager, want to come in and say, hey, I have some things that need to be approved, maybe I want to come in and say, you know what, let's see what would happen if we approve this request. You can go in, change that option, save, and you'll see a little dot refresh over several of these charts as that saves. That's just showing you as I made that update to my budget and my model, it immediately impacted all of the charts I have available here. So you can do the same for interest rates if you have your assumptions on a dashboard like this, or for workforce if you bring your personnel roster and you want to see what happens if I hire a new teller for one of my locations, something like that, then this is the perfect place to do that sort of visual analysis. Building this out is also pretty straightforward. Everything in Adaptive is click and drag. So if you come in to edit any sort of dashboard, if you have permission to do so, you can come in, have a library of charts to pick from and say, hey, I want to add a new KPI. And you'll have access to every single account that's been loaded into Adaptive. So yes, you'll have your GL accounts, but you can also have access to any other data that you like directly on the same dashboarding interface. So that's going to be dashboards. From here, I'm going to go ahead and take us into the financial statements and kind of how we'll actually start building those out. So we're going to start in the P&L. And while this is coming up, you're going to see a couple of things. So on the left-hand side are green numbers, and those are my actuals coming in automatically from my ERP. On the right side are my budget or plan numbers, and we'll kind of talk about how those are being built up. For now, I'm going to go ahead and navigate down to one of my departments or branches, and we'll talk through formulas and that kind of thing. So you're going to notice two other types of colors here. You're going to see blue carrots and red carrots. So blue carrots are calculated fields. To give you an example, we'll take a look at telephone. So calculations in Adaptive are pretty similar to Excel syntax. We don't use any sort of proprietary coding language, so no JavaScript, no Python, things that make us finance people kind of a little bit wary. We use pretty much the same operators. The main difference is that instead of using cell references like A2 times B 10,000, we actually use account names so you can see what is happening in the formula. So for this formula, just as a simple example, I can see I'm taking an assumption for telephone per head right here and multiplying it by the number of FTEs I have in my departments. So pretty straightforward. You can think of that kind of like named ranges almost. And then if you want to do anything more complicated, so your if statements or things like that, You also always have a formula assistant available. So it'll help you kind of figure out which accounts fall into a formula and that kind of thing. If you do have something like just a fiscal year budget for a specific OpEx line item, you can come in here and say, cool, for new hire training, I know we're going to spend 17K this year. So just one example of a way you might start building up your budget. And Adaptive is actually going to give you a bunch of ways to potentially break this back. These are out of the box functionalities. We do not need to put them in for you. And one really cool one is just Adaptive is actually tracking seasonality for you across every data point. So I can say, take that 17K and spread it back looking at last year's actuals. And you'll see that we have a more realistic idea of when we might actually spend that 17,000. So that's a more common way to kind of start budgeting for some of the basic OpEx line items. Of course, you're going to have more complex lines that you want a little bit more detail for. So we'll dig into workforce and revenue in this case, starting with workforce. So if I come in and right click on any of these lines, I have the same option to explore cell. And this is how we're actually going to get to the workforce planning template. So for that salary and wages line, if I come into personnel, we'll see some of the detail. And before I click into that workforce planning sheet, just one thing to note is that this bottom half of the cell explorer is permission based. So if I don't have salary detail permission, which is a checkbox on the back end of user permissions, I will not be able to see the bottom half of the cell explorer. I'll only see my total department or total branches employee burden. So nice way to protect your employee data. But I'll go ahead and follow this through to our workforce planning model. This is a model sheet. Model or nomenclature doesn't necessarily matter here. It's really just a sheet that you can bring any columns you want onto. We use this for prepaids, CRM data, opportunity level data, anything along those lines. We saw it for CapEx as well. So it truly is whatever you'd like to make it. We'll talk through functionality here real quick. You'll see a couple of these columns have drop downs on them. That's just saying, hey, when I pick a value from you, I want you to refer to a specific set of taxes in my specific workforce assumption sheet. So assumptions are really nice places for you to kind of manage global drivers, whether it's personnel, your interest rates, allowance for doubtful accounts, anything like that. So just think assumptions, global drivers. You'll also see that Will has two lines actually. That's because he's being allocated across two separate departments or branches. This is a really easy way to handle individual allocations and have Adaptive automatically split an individual salary across multiple dimensions. We do also have an allocations module if you have specific line items you like to allocate. All of your calculations will happen in the back end here. So if you want to come in and look at things like taxes, Adaptive will go ahead and see that Melanie has hit her tax maximum, cut it off until the next fiscal year. And you can, of course, always come into the base data you've loaded and start to make changes. So this is where you really get into the magic of building your budget by saying, what happens if I want to hire a new product manager or a new teller or manager or something like that? You are able to continue changing your data and seeing that impact live on your financial statements. So that's a very high level of workforce planning. We can do role-based planning as well for any part-time workers you might have that you don't want to track on an individual basis. But with that, go ahead and take us into some of the more financial services oriented revenue models, starting with our fee income model. So we're going to look at both fee income and interest income. So I'll open up a couple of these sheets. So our fee income sheet is a pretty straightforward sheet. What we're seeing here again are actuals and plan data. 2022 is our plan period here, slightly older instance. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is saying that our advisory and account fees are going to be based on total assets under management, basis points, and the billing cadence we expect from our different clients that we have on file. So that's how each of these items is being built out. Our withdrawals are actually being calculated based on a rate that we'll find in our assumption sheets. So if you're ever curious about how something is being calculated, again, you can come directly into Explore Cell and then drill down as far as you'd like to actually see the underlying calculation on one of these line items. So I'm looking at my withdrawals and I can see, hey, this is taking what my last month's assets under management were and going ahead and multiplying that by an assumption, which is our withdrawal rate. So a lot of these models will be assumption driven since a lot of these numbers tend to be based either on that kind of basis points or withdrawal rates or interest rates. But super quick snapshot of fee income. Interest income is going to take us into the last type of sheet in Adaptive, which is called a cube sheet. And what's really cool here is you can take our dimensions here on the top and say, if I want to look at our new volume by all of my branches, I just drag that level straight down. And I'm now looking at new volume and I have all of my branches going down the side. What you can also do to start to open this sheet up, let's say for budgeting or something like that, is say, hey, actually, I want to look at this by all of the loans those individual branches have as well. You can just pivot the sheet and we're going to be able to see that. You'll still be able to do things like suppress zeros and display options if you'd like to, but just giving you a quick view of a couple of different ways that you might start to interact with this sheet. And then, of course, if you want to start doing any sort of scenario analysis or adjustments, you can always come into your interest rates and start to play around with some of these numbers. So we have a couple of different types of interest rates. Most people don't just use one flat one. So you can see quite a few of the assumptions that we've been using around transfer pricing, interest rates, that withdrawal rate, that kind of thing. So the other type of sheet that I did want to show is actually very similar to this interest income sheet, and that's the interest expense sheet. Like I said, you can see this looks quite similar to the previous one. This is, again, based on assumptions, and pretty much you can interact with it similarly to how we just interacted with the interest income sheet, where you can bring your levels down and say, hey, let me look at my average balance by each of my total or each of my branches, something along those lines. So you can use these sheets either for live budgeting, kind of like we saw in more of the interest assumption sheet, or just as a way to look at a summarized view of data. The last sheet I actually wanted to show real quick was another capital model. So this capital model that's going to come up is pretty unique, and that some line items are driven off of headcount. So we see all of our new hire laptops are driven by our personnel FTEs, so our new hires in that specific month, whereas others are just based on a dollar amount. So this really just highlights, one, that you can use model sheets for a bunch of different purposes, and two, that you can mix and match planning logic as you'd like to, whether you'd like something to be formula-based, dollar-based, manual entry, anything along those lines. And that'll go ahead and calculate your depreciation for you as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take us into reports, which will close us out for today. So if I come into the reporting tab here, these are our web reports. So web reports in Adaptive are really great for any sort of ad hoc analysis that you'd like to be able to do. So we'll talk functionality, and then I'll show you a few different examples of what you can do with these reports. So this is an example of an expense variance analysis report. A couple of things to note here. One, all of the notes that people have left through the system, which have been denoted by little red carets on cells, aggregate for me here at the bottom. So that is nice, so that I don't have to go through 60 different sheets trying to see what branch 1, branch 2, branch 3 said about their budgets. I can just pull that account onto a report and see an aggregated view of everyone's feedback. These reports are also a really great thing to put as a last step in a process tracker, just to trigger people to actually look at, is my budget reasonable for this year? If yes, maybe I just leave a comment that, hey, this is good to go. If no, maybe I leave a comment about why I need a little bit more budget than I had last year. So lots of opportunity for collaboration throughout the platform. You also have the option here to still drill down into any of these numbers. So budget, actuals, variance data, anything like that. And you're still going to get to that same cell explorer. So you don't lose any detail by coming to the reporting interface. What's cool here as well is you can actually drill all the way down into transactional details. So if you see something that's yellow, maybe I want to look into that, I can come in and say, hey, let's look at actuals. And you're going to see a new option in the Cell Explorer, which is to drill into transactions. And this will show me all of the transactional detail from my ERP. So obviously I have a pretty small subset here. But if there's not really a limit on how many transactions you can load, obviously this is usually a longer list. What's cool here is you can add whatever fields you'd like. So invoice ID, vendor, anything like that. And then we can also just give people this view without having to make them go into their ERP. So that's important for non-core finance users who aren't as comfortable in financial systems. This is usually going to be a much easier interface for them to work with than having to go into something like an Oracle or a NetSuite or something along those lines. So increasing data visibility without increasing confusion. The other option we have on this type of report is to say, hey, I actually want to just look at this different account by my individual departments. So how my salary and wages account spreads across the organization. And you can see I have what looks like a brand new report with just 2 clicks. So as long as your data is tagged on your models, you are able to slice and dice reports as much as you'd like. You do also get up to 1,000 view-only users with Adaptive, so you can have just people sign in and look at their department's budget versus actuals throughout the year to help introduce some accountability into your process. You can download these as Excel and PDF if you'd like to distribute them that way. And then lastly, in terms of how you build these out, they are also click and drag. So usually spend one of these up in a minute or 2, which is why they are really great for ad hoc reporting. And so how that works is you have all of your elements from Adaptive right over here. And I can say, hey, I actually want to dimensionalize this and put our deposits on here or our loans on here, departments, anything along those lines. So pretty easy to spin these up. Just as one other example, I have an annual view of my financial highlights going from, yes, my income statement, but also looking at a couple of metrics around my financial advisors, summary metrics. We can start to get into capacity planning, which is really great. And then I also have my balance sheet plan down here. So lots of different options, not just to display your GL account data, but also to start to get into some more calculations or operational analysis. The last thing I wanted to cover today, just with the time we have left, is our Office Connect plugin. So this is the other type of reporting in Adaptive. It is our plugin to Microsoft Office 365, which means your actuals data and your budget that's all housed in Adaptive is going to be directly connected to your board presentations in PowerPoint, Word, and Excel. I'm going to focus on Excel for today. So we'll walk through functionality, and then I can show a couple of different examples. So if I highlight linked cells, blue cells are linked directly to Adaptive, and I can prove that out just by exploring cell. And this will take me directly back into Adaptive, where again, I can see all of the details that are underneath that final number and get back to whatever planning model is generating it. So even in Excel, you're still connected to the base data and base models. Green cells are going to be dynamic labels, so they'll refresh automatically as I update this report month over month. So you do not need to rebuild all of the reports I'm sure y'all have spent days or weeks trying to make. Adaptive's Office Connect is still click and drag. So I have very familiar elements over here. We like to keep things consistent. So this is really similar to the web reporting interface. And I can say, hey, for this existing report, let me go ahead and grab all of these accounts and drag them onto my report. So you're going to see each of these cells highlight blue, just saying that they're now dynamic. And all I really need to do is refresh. But instead of just refreshing, I'm also going to get next month's report. So right now I'm looking at March. If I come up to workbook properties and change the report date here, I'm going to roll that forward to April. And instead of taking days to update this, I'm going to click a refresh button. And you're going to see all of those rows of data populate down at the bottom. And I also have an updated trailing 6 from April, my new budget, actuals from this month last year, and updated year-to-date metrics. So pretty flexible. I was still able to keep all of my Excel formatting. So nice if you have any of the C-suite who tends to like a particular color or format on their report. Really nice way to still maintain that. And then you still have quite a few ad hoc capabilities, the ability to expand to accounts, different dimensions, anything like that, just to get a little bit more granular on some of your more formatted management reporting. And then lastly, if you want to create these types of reports across your organization, you don't need to do that manually. You can just come into repeating reports. It'll just ask you, hey, how do you want me to break this out? I'm going to say across a couple of my different levels. So branches, countries, departments, anything like that. And what Adaptive is going to do is make 3 new tabs at the bottom for those different levels that I just selected. And I have the same exact report, but for France, Canada, the US, and my total company. So lots of flexibility, and again, a really great way to start introducing accountability throughout the organization. And lastly, just to showcase, you can do a lot of other things with this type of reporting, either with your KPIs, if you have specific charts that you like in Excel, all of these will be connected to that base data in Adaptive. Okie dokie, that's all I had for y'all today. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Justin and follow up with any questions that we got after the demo today.
Thank you, Haley. So to wrap up, we do want you to not miss part 2. If you can make yourselves available on Thursday, October 19th at 4 p.m., which will be a follow-up for financial services organizations. You can join us for a fireside chat with Ben Hart, who is the CEO of Texans Credit Union, and he'll be sharing his journey with Workday Adaptive Planning and how they got to an agile planning process. He'll provide insights into how he gets answers to what-if scenario questions while in meetings, how they use dashboards, how they've streamlined collaboration across the organization, communication and decision-making, and the overall transformation of the organization's planning process into an adaptable and agile one with adaptive planning. So that should be very fruitful if you can attend Thursday the 19th. The information is on our website to get registered for that. So please do go ahead and do that. You can learn more about Revelwood and our implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. While you're there, we also encourage you to visit our Knowledge Center, where we offer tips and tricks about all aspects of the planning process, technical tips, planning tips, and various tips about business aspects of your FP&A model. So thank you all again for attending today. Once again, either myself or one of my colleagues will be reaching out for hopefully a 15-minute follow-up call to get your feedback and provide any resources that might be helpful to you. Hopefully you will take the time and let us know how we can help. Thank you so much.